sings. Sometimes all of our thoughts are misgiven.
And it's very nice how he kind of swells into each line. He starts off nice and quiet and then swells into it and then fades out. So it's almost like bookends of fading in, fading out, and then this nice like swollen into volumized middle part of the line. Hey everyone, Adam Mishan here, singer, songwriter, and vocal coach. Today I'm going to be reacting to Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, live versus the recorded version.
Run, run, lost boy, they say to me.
Definitely one of the classic rock songs, probably one of the best rock songs of all time. I mean, could go up against Bohemian Rhapsody, but, you know, in my books, one of the best. And, I mean, not like my books mean anything, but definitely a long song and a long intro that we're not used to hearing these days. But it's incredible that such a long song has gotten so much radio play. It's been a while since I checked it out, but when I checked it out last, it was the most played rock song of all time on the radio. That could have changed by now, but let's keep going.
All it glitters is gold. And she's
all right, so very interesting way to start. I remember taking a songwriting course. And one of the main aspects of the songwriting course was to make sure that you try to keep the lyrics of your song as close to the way that we speak them as possible, which could potentially change the way that the melody of the song is sung, because you have to adjust that in order to make sure that the words are being spoken as clearly as possible. So here's a perfect example. All that glitters is gold, right? That's the line that he's saying, but actually sings it, all that glitters is gold. So the emphasis is on the wrong syllable. And so that is kind of a songwriting no-no, but you know, there's always exceptions to those rules, and right here is an exception to that rule, where a song very clearly broke that rule and still became one of the best songs of all time. So interesting to note that. Also interesting to note how he approaches starting this song. Starts it with a little bit of a vocal fry. There's a lady who's sure, right? So he's kind of coming in with right? Could have easily come in with a lot more breath, especially starting in softly in a song. You can sometimes go, there's a lady who's sure, right? Which might be like my inclination for starting this song. Starting it with a bit of a breathy approach, but he totally took a different route, which I wouldn't naturally, or my inclination would not be to do that.
and she's buying a stairway to heaven.
So everything is extremely connected. There's not really any breathiness coming through. There's almost an over-engagement of chord closure throughout this whole, like there's a compression to every one of the words that he's saying. That helps to kind of add this element of emotion, right? Where when you have a bit of a cry underneath the tone, that kind of induces a little bit of tighter chord closure, which induces a little more compression of the vocal cords. And you get this kind of ooh, right? And it's not ooh, which would be more of that fluty type of feel, which would be a totally different approach, but both are valid approaches to singing it. Just he's taking more of that compressed sound.
Sometimes all of our thoughts are misgiven.
And it's very nice how he kind of swells into each line. He starts off nice and quiet and then swells into it and then fades out. So it's almost like bookends of fading in, fading out, and then this nice like swollen into volumized middle part of the line. And so those parts he's doing with a little bit of a lower larynx, so it's not like, ooh, it makes me wonder, right, which he uses a lot. Here he's going, ooh, it makes me wonder, with a little bit of that yawn feeling in the throat. That yawn feeling, that hootiness, allows for a little bit more passage of air and a little less of that squeeze.
And my spirit is crying for leaving.
Okay, so now the landscape of the instrumental is changing. There's more instruments coming in, and his vocal is coming to match that. So there's a little bit more intensity coming in with the vocal. And I like how now the vocal is starting to sit above the instruments, but at the beginning, like, it was really on par with the instruments volume-wise. You don't hear that much in modern music, where usually the vocal is sitting significantly above volume-wise the rest of the instruments, whereas here it was kind of like sunk right into it. It was along with it, and now it's starting to peak above.
It makes me wonder.
Yeah, and so that allows that kind of his vocal being embedded somewhat within the instruments. It almost allows him for that swell of the ooh to be able to kind of creep in there to the point where you're like, I don't know if I hear his voice or if it's like I'm anticipating his voice coming in there. You can't even hear him start. It's just like almost swells out of nowhere because it's at the same volume level of the rest of the instruments until he starts to swell into that.
Bible will lead us to reason.
And so here he's using a lot more of a neutral larynx position. So his larynx is kind of sitting in that kind of spoken area where he would speak out those words. Whereas the ooh, it makes you wonder was definitely more of a lowered larynx position. He's changing up his larynx position based on where he is in the song. Beautiful.
It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen.
Yeah, this is like one of those songs that nobody should really cover because it's so perfect the way Led Zeppelin did it. It's like to touch it would be almost sacrilegious. But if you are going to be singing this, it's important to kind of realize what the vocal effects that he's using are so that you can start to try to input those aspects into your voice, not necessarily to sound exactly like him, but to approach it in a similar manner so that you're not kind of just like screaming from the beginning or, you know, not swelling into the specific spots where he does. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to do this in your own voice, please check out right here. I've got a card available for you. On my website, you'll find in that card at the bottom of the page, you can sign up for a free lesson where I'll teach you exactly how to start employing these things in your voice. So check that out.
But in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Yeah, and so now he's starting to actually use a little bit the opposite of the lower larynx position. He's using a little bit of that kind of like bratty type of kid. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, right? He's kind of like using a little bit of that type of sound, a little bit. Just enough, like it's still balanced within the rest of it, but that's kind of how he's getting that sound in his voice. He's also swelling in compression as well, so he's now digging in a little bit more, getting into his full voice here. Not totally in a call register yet, but he's in his kind of like middle ground where he a little bit above a conversational level.
Dear lady, can you hear the wind blow? And did you know?
And that was interesting because there he started off in a lowered larynx. Dear lady, can you hear the window? Right? So he's kind of starting off in a lowered larynx position and then leading to a little bit more of a neutral larynx position as he goes. Nice. Yeah, so now you've got a doubled vocal, at least doubled, if not tripled. This kind of adds to the impact of that vocal for this kind of like really, really high part. And you can hear how each vocal kind of adds its own part to the song. So it's not that they're all perfectly in sync, whereas like, you know, today we take vocals and we'll double it, right? We'll kind of add it to a new track and then just kind of shift it a little bit. It'll sound like a doubled vocal. This is truly 100% a real doubled vocal because there are nuances that are different about each vocal that's going in there. And, you know, here he's using a lot more of that kind of like really nasally little kid type of voice. That type of resonance is coming in here to be able to find that really, really high range. Yeah, you can tell you here they're not singing exactly the same at all, but it gives it such an interesting vibe, and it's like it almost becomes its own unit once it's all put together. And I absolutely love this ending. Now you're coming down from this massive, pumped up end part of the song. You're coming to your outro. They fade everything out to this line.
A stairway to heaven.
If you like this video, check out this one, because I'm sure you're going to love it as well. The